see how the partners work and operate. And you get to sit in on a lot of pitch meetings. So you get to see a lot of startups come in, present their companies to the partners. You see how the partners think. So there's a real utility and value in being there. And usually these meetings happen on Mondays. Monday afternoon for Crosslink was their pitch day or pitch afternoon, whatever we're going to call it. And I remember this one particular Monday, a firm came in, a company came in. They were in the later stages of the investment process with us. And they brought in their full team. It was like 6 or 7 executives, which was really interesting because most people don't do this. And at the beginning, which was kind of the practice of Crosslink, one of the partners asked the CEO who was starting his pitch just to introduce himself and the team. So each one of the executives on the team introduced themselves along with the CEO. The CEO took about 3 or 4 minutes. The executives took 2 or 3 minutes each. And 15 to 20 minutes later, they were done introducing themselves. And they were done with the possibility of getting an investment because you just can't do that. It's a killer when you do that. So how many people should you bring? Because when they got to the rest of the meeting, most of these people didn't say a word. And that's the tell. The tell is that we only want to bring people that are going to participate in the meeting. That's it. Those are the only people that you want to bring. If you're not going to participate in the meeting, then you don't want to bring those people. So it's maybe one person, maybe 2 people at most. So if you're the technologist, bring the marketing person. If you're the marketing person, bring the technologist. You get the idea. Questions in the chat box. So anyways, that's the basic rule. So bringing 5 or 6, that's like a massive red flag. It does mean if you have a larger group of founders, that some founders are going to be disappointed because it's a cool thing to come to these meetings. I'm not going to argue with you. There's a coolness to it if you've never been. It's like, wow, this is great. I get to go. And to have to tell somebody, one of your co-founders, that they don't get to go, it hurts. And it's one of your tests of leadership to do this. So I had 4 other co-founders. So I had to tell 2 or 3 of these people regularly, sorry, you're not coming to these meetings. And I can remember one of my co-founders, I'm not going to say who he was, but he was visibly hurt. Now, he had a heart of gold, and I explained it to him, and he was okay with it. But it was like, well, why can't I go? And it was like, well, because I can cover your part. So you're not needed, and it's just going to get in the way. And this isn't about your ego. This is about what's right for the business and how do we do things in the right way. So that's the lesson here in terms of what we do and what we don't do. So let's go to our next question. If you have questions for me, you can put them in the chat box on Zoom or YouTube, and I'll be happy to answer them for you. So with that, let me look at our next question. Okay, how do you compete against larger companies for talent? Okay, this is another really good question because it is, I'm not going to argue with you. It's really hard to compete against larger companies because they have more resources, they have more money than you do. You'll never compete on money, ever, because they can always offer more money. So it's not a fair world. So what do? How do we get these experienced people? If we need experienced people to join us, what do we sell them on? Well, you sell them on your vision. You sell them on the potential of the equity. It isn't any more complicated than that. That's what we do. Because that's all we have, at the beginning of this. That's it. That's it. Because you're never going to outcompete somebody on the cash piece of this. But you can do things that the other companies can't, because bigger companies, you may be a small cog in the machine of what you do, but in a smaller company, in a startup, you can have a material impact. And when we were in this situation, we were competing against larger companies. That was our sell, was, hey, you can have a big impact here. You can do things here. You can be part of something here that you can't be part of at these larger companies that you're at. They've had their day. It's our day now. That was the sell. And we were able to successfully compete and get really good talent into our company using that simple strategy. So try it. It works. It may sound super simple, and it is super simple, but you just have to believe in what you're doing, and you have to find true believers. And you have to find people that are at the right stage of their life to be able to do this. Because many times what you'll find is that people aren't at the right stage of their life. So they can't take the risk that you can take. And that's part of this. So that's the challenge. So let's go to our next question. All right. When I use comparables to assess the value of my company, is a 5 to 7 year company in the same space a good reference? I'm not sure what you're trying to use the comparables for. If you're trying to use them for the valuation of your company today, the answer is no. Because the valuation for early stage startups, which I'm going to assume most of the people who are watching this today are probably early stage startup CEOs, valuations are very mechanical. They're not, it's not, if you think about this, I've done a video on this, which you can find on my YouTube channel, about how valuations are done. And it's not any of the classic techniques that you think, like net present value or anything like that. That's not the way investors look at things. Investors at the beginning, they have to own a certain percentage of the company for it to be worthwhile for them. So they're not going to look at comparable valuations of a company in your space that's 5 to 7 years old or something like that. They're not going to do that. What they're going to do is they're going to look at the valuation of your company today and say, okay, we need to, if you're raising $5 million, for example, that typically you're going to give up somewhere between 20 and 30% of your company in all likelihood. So that's going to determine the valuation, nothing more than that. So that's one piece of this. The other piece of this that I want to remind you of is there are more terms in a term sheet than just the valuation. There are other things that are important. So that's a much more detailed thing. Can't really do that in this type of a format to go through all the various things, but there are many other things which are important when we're looking at term sheets besides the valuation. And I would tell you as a third thing, the valuations are going to be in that range, almost regardless of what you do. The third thing that I would tell you, if you're evaluating investors and you actually have the option of multiple investors, because most people don't have that option. Most people, it is all we have is just this one potential investor, and that's it. So if you have the option of multiple investors, you want to look at the quality of the people that you're working with. Are they going to be supportive of you? Are they going to back you regardless of what happens? Because that's what we care about at the end of the day. The valuations are nice and good, but if they don't back you, none of it matters. So remember that. So I hope that that answers your questions. So if you have a question for me, you can put it in the chat box if you're watching on Zoom, which means you're part of my group, Zero to Pitch. You can watch there. Or if you're watching on YouTube, you can put it in the chat box on YouTube and give me a question there. So let's go to our next question. When do I get the right to call myself CEO? Okay. I feel a little bit of imposter syndrome coming up here when I hear that question. from day zero, you get the right to call yourself CEO. Even if you are a one-person company, which is how all of our companies start, right? There's one of us, maybe two of us, and we decide we're going to start a business together. And that's it. That's okay. So that's what you have at the beginning. That's fine. That's cool. No worries. That's how we're going to start. You're the CEO. It may just be the two of you. Maybe it's you and your CTO at the beginning. Those are your titles. Doesn't matter, whether it's a one-person company or a 1,000-person company. There's always a leader in the company. It is usually a red flag if there is no CEO. So be proud, and assume the position. Somebody's going to have to assume the leadership position of the company. Somebody needs to lead the company. Why not let it be you? All right. So that, if we have other questions, you can put them in the chat box on Zoom or YouTube for me, and I'll be happy to answer them for you. So go ahead and fire away with your questions. Okay, another good question. Are COOs needed in startups? Okay, I have a view on this in a lot of C-level positions, and it's going to go against the grain, but it's my view. Most C-level positions and definitely COOs are not needed in startups. So let me explain why. And you can argue with me, you can agree with me, you can disagree with me, what have you, but this is my feeling on it. So for a COO, if you think about what a COO does, COO would be somebody who runs the operations part of the business, right? It's doing the day-to-day operations of the business. And let's contrast that with a good startup CEO. A good startup CEO is very detail-oriented, knows the operations of the business inside and out. So I would say in most cases, this may not be 100% true in all cases, but in most cases, the CEO should be doing that job. You don't need a COO, and you don't want a COO, because the COO is in the way between you and your team. And it's just going to create problems. So you don't need a COO. Of all the mistakes I made running my company, one of the biggest mistakes I made was making somebody COO at the beginning. I shouldn't have done it. We didn't need it. And he wasn't really the operations person of the company anyways. He was running test engineering for us. He wasn't running operations. It just got in the way. So don't make the same mistake I did. You don't need that person. Quite frankly, you probably don't need that person at a 500-person company, maybe even a 1,000-person company. So don't make mistakes like that. And for most of these C-level positions at the beginning, with the exception, I would say, of CTO, you probably don't need them. And if people are there for the ego piece of this and getting their ego stroked and having the title of C this, C level this, C level that, they're not the right people to be in a startup, because most people should be head down, excited about the work and trying to get the work done, not excited about, being a C-level executive in the company. That's not it. That's not what you want. So I hope that helps. All right. We have another good question. I'm going to take a little drink here. I'm sorry. It's funny. So I was overseas for like the last 3 weeks, and I caught a cold last Thursday before we came home, and and I still have it. So my voice is a little scratchy. So I apologize. So let me just drink some water. All right. So now let's go to our next question. What are the common problems that a solo founder encounters when dealing with investors? Okay, another fantastic question. So when we deal with investors, the deal is risk reduction. Investors want their risks reduced. So think about the logical risks that you have as a solo founder from an investor's perspective. And I've worked with several solo founders. I helped the solo founder raise his initial funding and have helped that company now grow to be worth multiple billions of dollars. So yeah, you can definitely raise money as a solo founder. There's no question about it. But what's the biggest risk? It's an obvious risk. And the risk is, can you recruit? If you think about what startup CEOs have to do at the beginning, and this was told to me by a recruiter for the first CEO job I ever interviewed for. He said to me, startup CEOs have to recruit, sell, sell, sell. And you have to be able to recruit. So as a solo founder, almost by definition, you haven't proven you can recruit. So how do we overcome this? Well, our goal, interestingly enough, is to find other founders. And it may turn out that these people don't join you at the start, which is fine. But you know what? That's okay. You want to have people lined up. That's the idea here. So if we can't find other founders, and the idea here shouldn't be, well, I want to hold all the equity for myself, that's why I'm not bringing on other founders. That's a horrible decision, to make. Horrible decision. That will really burn you if you do that. So I would not recommend that at all. So assume that you're looking for somebody, assume that you're looking for other employees, founders, whatever. So what you want to prove is you want to show investors, hey, I've got all these people lined up for various reasons. They couldn't join pre-funding, but they're ready to go post-funding. So you want to have a lineup of people which shows, hey, I can recruit, because that's the biggest issue that you have as a solo founder. That's the biggest issue you're going to have to overcome. So yes, you can raise money as a solo founder. I've seen it work. How did this person that I helped raise his initial, I think he raised 6.5 million, if I remember right. How did he raise his initial 6.5? Was exactly the way I described. He had a founder lined up. The founder's wife didn't want him to join the company until the company got funded. Fine, he made him an offer, signed the offer, had everything ready to go post funding, and then he had other people lined up post funding. That reduced the risk from the investor standpoint. They said, okay, he can recruit, like the idea, like the concept of what he's doing. The risks are minimal, we're in. But when I see a solo founder and they haven't been able to recruit anybody, they don't have any employees lined up, that's probably in many cases a bridge too far. So you have to be recruiting at all times, and you should be open to the possibility of having co-founders. If you do that, then you're going to have people join the company at the right time. If you don't, and you're just miserly and you're trying to save the equity all for yourself, it's going to blow up in your face. That's what I would tell you. Okay, if we have more questions, put them in the chat box and the chat box on Zoom. If you're watching on Zoom, if you're watching on YouTube, you can put it in the chat box on YouTube for me. So let me go look. Let's go look and see what we got. All right. How do I determine what my SAM and TAM are? Okay, this is a common question, one that many founders get confused by. So let's go through our definitions here and why they're important for you and how do you do this. So first of all, with all numbers, you have to own the numbers. which means that even if you're looking at market research that you've purchased, have found on the internet, whatever, you can't say, well, it's McKinsey's market research that I'm going after. Doesn't work. They're your numbers. You have to own them. So let's go through our definitions. Served available market, that's kind of the way we start, right? There's a served market and there's a total market. Served market is the market at the beginning of the process. And if we get every single customer to buy from us and we're getting 100% of their business, what would our revenue be? That is the definition of the served available market. Every single customer buys from us. So the way that we look at this is let's say we're selling in North America and we have one distribution, it's all online customers. That's our distribution channel at the beginning, but there's also offline customers too. But we're only selling online. How big is the opportunity? Well, it's going to be kind of the intersection of those things. All the customers in North America divided by only the online customers in North America. And if they all bought from us, our revenue would be whatever number it is. Now, let's say over time, company has grown, products have grown, services have grown, everything else. And our vision is to go into these other markets, compete in these other channels, compete worldwide, et cetera. Our total available market is now that intersection. The total available market represents our vision. Where are we going with this company? How much revenue will we do? If every single customer in all of the distribution channels that are available to us, all the networking channels that we have, so online, let's say we're selling at retail outlets worldwide, whatever the combination of all these things are, how many potential customers are there for us in the niche that we're serving? And if we got 100% of the revenue, what would our revenue be? That's the way to look at this. So that's what we want to do here. That's the way to look at our market numbers. If the market numbers don't add up to those things and there are suddenly different numbers in this, then you've done it wrong. So there are two ways to calculate your market numbers. There's what's called a top-down analysis, which means we look at kind of market research and divide down from that. And then there's what's called bottom-up analysis, which means that we say, okay, we know that X number of units are sold and the price is Y. Our price is going to be Y. So X times Y. If 100% of these people bought from us, that's our number. And then the total market over time is, let's say we have 3 different product lines. If you add them all up, that would be our number. That's the way to look at it. Okay, let's go to our next question. Okay, so he says, I sent my question on the school app. Okay. Let's go find it. Well, a long question. Okay. I'm currently working with a friend of mine on his fintech. We both co-founded. He's the technical founder. He knows little about his startup business sides. Okay. Investors talking with him only regarding the investment. Who should the investor talk to? Well, who's the CEO? Is it you or is it your friend? That's who the investor should be talking to. The CEO is the person that the CEO is the leader. The CEO is the person in theory that can raise the money. So who is it? Second question. I presented equity we can go about. Investor made his structure. Okay, and it turns out I'm in Class A share of only X%. An investor. Question: who qualifies for Class A? I have no idea. And I'm sorry for being a little flippant here. I have absolutely no idea how you structure things. So it's impossible for me to know. So you have to look at how the Class A shares were structured versus I don't know whether there's a Class B share, which is what you're kind of implying here, what the rights of the Class A are, et cetera, versus the total number of shares. And do Class A shares account as super shares or not, or whatever, and all these other crazy things. I have no idea. Nobody would except for you and your co-founder. So I would ask your co-founder and you want to look at that. Okay. My co-founder initially gave 40%. When comes, he said that prematurely because investor now wants 45% of the business. It's a lot. I don't know how much you guys are raising. 45% in today's world is a large number. What things to consider when giving a business co-founder equity? Well, I'm not exactly sure what you're getting to here, but your equity is what you and your co-founders agree to. So if you're the CEO and you have a co-founder, then you and your co-founder have to decide what's fair. So let me tell you what's not fair. If you keep 95% for yourself and 5% for your co-founder, that's not fair. That's not going to work. It has to, you both have to feel good about it after the negotiation is over. That's my basic rule for dividing up equity, whatever those numbers are between yourself and your co-founders. So it should be, somewhere between, a 50-50 split to, I don't know, depending upon the seniority of the co-founder, what the co-founder is doing, maybe 2/3 for you, 1/3 for the co-founder, which would be probably as low as you would go in terms of equity. But it's got to be reasonably similar. You should probably have the most if you're the CEO, but it shouldn't be 90-10. So that would be my answer to that particular question. Okay, the next question. If the investor signed an ownership agreement, excuse me, and founders signed the term sheet, when can we expect money in the bank? I asked the investor. He said in December. To me, this appears as if the money the investor is going to raise at December. No, that's a long time, by the way. If we're sitting here in September, we're talking December, and you're an early stage company, that's a long period of time, to close. I would be asking, why does it take so long to close? Typically for an early stage company, and I don't know what stage your company's at, but let's say it's early stage and it's the first money in, that's probably, you should be pushing to close in 4 weeks. Not anything longer than that, but wow, 9 or 10 weeks, which is kind of what we're talking about here. We're sitting here in September, mid-September, we're talking about December. Let's say it's December 1st close. That's 10 weeks from now. That's a long time. Why is this taking so long? What are the steps? What you have to understand is a term sheet is a non-binding document. The term sheet gets converted into the closing documents, which your lawyers and the investors' lawyers will work together on. And obviously, you'll have a large say in this in terms of what happens. And once the closing documents are done, then the money gets wired into your bank account. When we raised our money, I think it took us about 4 weeks. Our initial funding, it took us about 4 weeks to close. That was it. So I don't know. I mean, that's 10 weeks or 12 weeks. That sounds really long to me. So I would be questioning what's going on there. Okay, final question in this group of long questions here. Currently, are working with an investor to run the startup. He decides who to hire. Okay, red flag number 1. How much equity advisors and employees should get? Red flag number 2. This is my commentary, by the way. It's the first time I work with an investor and he applies MBA teachings to a startup. Okay, what are your thoughts? Essentially is what the rest of the question is. My thoughts are this shouldn't be. Experienced investors let the CEO run the company. They shouldn't be decided. They shouldn't be deciding how much equity. Now, having said that, they have to approve it because if they're on your board, the board approves the equity for anybody in the company. But they should be your thoughts. And I'll tell you what, I've never had an investor overrule my thoughts on how much equity I would give somebody. So as long as there's a logical reason for what you're doing, why are they going to overrule you? And the answer is they're not. So anyways, my my thoughts for what it's worth as I'm listening to this. I don't think you have a good investor you're working with there. They want too much control. They're trying to run the company for you. That's a red flag. That shouldn't be. Okay, let's go to our next question. How does the interest rate environment affect the capital for startups? Well, the way that it affects it is probably indirectly, not directly, because there's no interest rate on your capital, right? But from a market perspective, if the market is slow, in other words, if we see like right now, the economy, at least here in the United States, is slowing down, it's getting worse. So if the economy is getting worse and the economy is slowing down, well, you know, that affects investors because the investors we're all part of one ecosystem here. So from an investor perspective, it might mean, you know what? I may want to slow down my investment process. I might want to take a little longer, to invest and be more discerning on when and who I invest in, because maybe money's tight. Maybe it's going to be harder for me to raise the next my next fund. So I may want to have this fund last longer. I may want to allocate more capital to my existing investments to protect them, because maybe it's going to be hard for them to raise their next rounds of funding too. That's the way it affects you. It's indirectly. Having lived through the Great Recession and raising money in the Great Recession, things got a lot slower because there was no sense of urgency for investors to invest at that point in time. So anyways, that's my thought as I'm listening to this. Okay, so if you have questions for me, you can put them in the chat box if you're watching me on either Zoom or YouTube. I'm going to take another drink of water to clear my throat again. Thank you. And let's look to see what other questions we have. Oops. There we are. Okay. Answered that. How many startups can you manage at once? Okay, the old multiple startup question. My belief is one. I think it's a huge mistake to kind of dilute yourself. There are notable exceptions to this, but they're few and far between. And I wouldn't kid myself. It's hard enough to build one successful startup. Why on earth would you try and do two in parallel? It's too damn hard. So focus on one thing, embrace the one thing that you've got going, make that successful. Don't worry about anything else, and let the chips fall where they may. But don't try and do multiple startups at once. You're just begging for trouble. So don't do that. That's not a good idea. Okay, more questions for me. You can put them in the chat box on Zoom or YouTube, and I'll be happy to answer them for you. Let me use this time to make a little pitch. If you're interested in working with me and you want to work with me directly, join my group Zero to Pitch Gold. It is a great way to learn. It is a great way to get started. There's a link for that. I don't know why the link isn't showing today, but the link isn't showing. But there's a link for it on my YouTube channel. It costs all of $150 a month. You get access to me every day in office hours. If you join today, in an hour and 20 minutes, you could be in office hours working with me. And by the way, next week, there's going to be a big surprise, big upgrade coming to Zero to Pitch Gold. You can find out about it next week. If you join a webinar that I'm having next Wednesday at this time. It will not be available on YouTube, by the way, but it will be available if you're part of my Zero to Pitch group or if you're part of my mail list, you can join the webinar from that. There'll be a big announcement coming regarding Zero to Pitch Cold next week. Okay, next question. I believe bot engagement would help you more than live shows. Your time is more valuable than using it on dead live show time. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that for what it's worth. Okay, let's go to our next question. If you have questions for me, I've got time for a few more questions. So if you have questions for me, you can put them in the chat box on Zoom or YouTube. Okay, what do you feel about AI and its impact on investing? Well, interesting enough, I just released a video on AI last Thursday and my thoughts on AI and investing. So you can actually watch that on my YouTube channel and get my latest thoughts. I'll give you a quick synopsis though of my thoughts. There is going to be a ton of money put into it. In fact, about half of all venture capital went into AI startups in the first half of 2025. And it's going to be massively overinvested in, just like previous bubbles that we've seen over the years. Anybody who's been involved in startups kind of knows that there's always kind of like a herd mentality amongst investors, and usually what you see is too much money going into the obvious places, and AI is one of these places where people go, oh my God, I just have to invest. And there's going to be overinvestment. There's going to be a lot of failures. And the return, interestingly enough, on the capital, if it follows the past patterns of other bubbles and other things that investors like to invest in, will not be that great. Interestingly enough. Now, for you as CEOs, what should you do? Well, don't do the obvious things. The things that usually work are the more contrarian ideas, the less obvious things. So push yourself to be a contrarian, find unique ways to do things. Go a little bit off of the hidden path, the beaten path, so to speak, and push that way. That's where I believe you'll see successes. What I've seen in the work that I've done and the startups that I've been involved in, the successful ones are usually the ones that have really unique ideas, have this combination of a unique idea, maybe going after a second or third market. In other words, not the most obvious market, but maybe the second most obvious market or the third most obvious market, and a great team to execute it. Those three things. So find a great team, find a unique opportunity, find a unique way to solve the problem, and you're off and running. That's what I would say. Okay, let's go to our next question. Okay. Difficult, but maybe you have an idea. How many years are we from the physical AI wave? I honestly don't know. Oh, and the question just got deleted just when I was it's just going to start answering it. So I don't know. I have no idea, by the way. So, oh, here it is. Okay, it just came back. Okay. How many years are we from the physical AI wave? The capital for robotics is shorter because they say it's capital intensive. You know, I, I'm sorry, I'm stopping myself because I think that's a misnomer. The typical startup, just so everybody understands, between getting initial funding and a liquidation event meaning an acquisition, or the company IPAs, the typical, and it's probably getting even longer than this, is 7 to 10 years. So first, make sure you understand that there's no rush to success. And what you find is most companies are going to take, depending upon the markets that they're in, a large amount of capital to become really, really huge. I don't know how much money OpenAI has raised, but it's in the hundreds of billions, I think, at this point. It's some insane number that they've raised. So and you kind of think about it, well, where's the capital intensity? They're building software, but they need a lot of money. because probably the other thing that they're having to do is fund data centers all over the place, as time goes on. And there's some relationship between each generation of their product and needing more data power, so to speak. So there's a lot of capital intensity in any of these businesses, be them robotics or non-robotics. The typical thing and the challenge at the beginning for the more hardware intensive, capital intensive businesses is proving that you have something that works at the beginning. That's usually the challenge that I've seen. Now, my background is hardware. I come from that world, and it was in an industry that sunk. From a venture capital standpoint, VCs got sick of funding semiconductor companies and seeing nothing come back. So our whole strategy when we raised money was showing them, hey, we don't need a lot of money to do what we did. And to be able to show we have product, to be able to show we have customers, to be able to show we have revenue, and to get to cash flow positive. So part of your challenge when you're doing something that requires capital like robotics is proving the business concept quickly, so that you don't need a ton of money to prove it. So you have to think creatively about how you do that and what can you do. That's the way I would think about that. Okay. So let me answer our next question, which is from our Zoom audience. I don't want to lose communication with my customers growing as the startup can use an app like School or any tools to drive engagement. Your question's too broad for me to be able to answer it. For me to be able to understand what you're asking, I would need to know a lot more specifics about your business rather than giving some general answer. So I can't answer it. I'm sorry. Okay, I have time for maybe one more question. I'm going to drink some more water. It's amazing how long it takes to get over a cold. So I'm feeling better, but it takes a long time. All right, let's see. Okay, final question. Final question. Okay, that's not the question. When should you start paying yourself as CEO? Another really good question, because I know usually at the beginning, we don't have any money, we don't pay ourselves. The answer is as soon as possible. That's what we want to do. Excuse me, as soon as we can, start paying yourself. Smartest thing in the world you can do. Smartest thing in the world you can do is start paying, even if it's $1, start paying yourself something, because you start building discipline when you do this. If you don't start paying yourself, there's a lack of discipline in the company. It just makes sense. And by the way, let me go to a second piece of this definition. We think about, we have to get to cash flow positive. What's the definition of cash flow positive? Well, you could say, well, it's when my company is generating cash. And my answer would be, no, it's not. My answer would be, yes, that's one of the things, but there's a second piece. And that is when you don't have to keep paying yourself out of your bank account. In other words, your personal bank account doesn't get deleted. You have enough cash that you're able to pay yourself so that you're able to have a sustainable lifestyle. And this doesn't mean living like a king. It means living reasonably. So you're able to pay your mortgage, pay your loans, whatever you have going on, and live your life reasonably. That's when you're cash flow positive. That's the answer. Okay, last question. Is there a worse time of year to raise capital? Yeah, there is actually. We just went through it. The summer months are usually the worst time. And there's better times of year. The best time of year, I would say, is January through maybe through Memorial Day in the US. That time period is probably the best because most investors are there. This time period that we're moving into right now, the school year is beginning. all the way until the holidays when we get to Thanksgiving at the end of November. This next 2 month period is a really good time to raise money. But my answer to you would be when you're ready to start raising money, raise money. I've raised money in the summer. It can be done. It just goes a little slower. People are on holiday. You work around the schedules. So when you're ready to go, go. Don't wait until the perfect time because there is no perfect time. Because even when the quote unquote timing is good, the economy might not be good. And we don't know when that's going to happen. So you think about right now in the US, we have all sorts of uncertainty regarding the economy. All sorts of uncertainty. And we don't know what's going to happen economically. We may have a massive recession because of the economic policies going on right now. And if you think about it, there are these tariffs that are happening right now. They're impacting things. Growth is slowing. I just saw before I came on today that the growth rate in the United States is down to like 1.5%. The employment levels are going down. Inflation is going up. That is not a good combination of things. How it's going to affect the funding environment, we'll have to see. But uncertainty, which is what this adds up to, isn't the best thing. That is not a time of year thing. That is just on top of the time of year that also affects things. And you don't know when that's going to impact you. So my advice is always when you're ready to go, go. That's the answer. All right. So with that, I think we're going to call it a day. I don't think we have any other questions. This this will be available on YouTube. If you want to watch this as a recording, you can watch this as a recording on YouTube. So with that, thank you all very much. If you're interested in joining Zero to Pitch Gold, you can find the links to that on my YouTube channel. Thanks a lot. Take care. You have a great day. Bye.